Commander Zalthek pressed his palm against the cold metal wall of the *whispered Dawn's * bridge and felt the subtle vibrations that meant his ship was dying. The hum was wrong. Everything was wrong. 3 years ago, this massive vessel had been the crown jewel of the Velnari fleet, stretching nearly 2 kilometers from bow to stern, its crystal spires gleaming like captured starlight. Now those same spires flickered weakly, their bioluminescent cores starving for the energy they could no longer spare. So, the genetic archives are failing, Science Officer Nethra announced from her station, her 6-fingered hands dancing across holographic displays that sparked and stuttered. Her voice carried the hollow despair that had infected them all since the cascade began. We have perhaps 50 breeding pairs left with viable genetic diversity. 2 generations, maybe 3, and we're extinct. Zalthek closed his 4 eyes and tried to remember what hope felt like. Once, their fleet had numbered in the hundreds, sleek warships, massive colony vessels, research craft that could bend space itself. The Velnari had ruled 7 worlds across 3 star systems, their civilization spanning 2,000 years of careful genetic planning and technological perfection. Every birth had been calculated, every gene sequence optimized, every social structure designed for maximum efficiency. And now they were dying because of that very perfection. "Show me the archive status," he commanded, his voice barely above a whisper. The main display flickered to life, revealing the cool mathematics of extinction. Red warning symbols covered nearly every genetic line. The Velnari had spent centuries eliminating what they called imperfections from their genome. No genetic diseases, no random mutations, no messy biological chaos. Every citizen had been a masterpiece of biological engineering. But perfection, as they learned too late, was brittle. When the stellar cascade began, a chain reaction of dying stars that swept across their sector like a cosmic plague, the Velnari had tried to evacuate their worlds with typical efficiency. They loaded their ships with the most genetically valuable citizens, the brightest minds, the strongest bodies. They left behind anyone who didn't meet their exacting standards. Those imperfect people they abandoned might have held the key to survival. The cascade consumed Velnerok yesterday. Navigator Colvan reported from his station, his voice tight with grief. That was our last colony world. Everything we built, everything we were, it's all stellar dust now. Zalthek watched the tactical display update in real time. Red zones spread across the map like an infection, marking dead systems where their suns had exploded in sequence. The cascade moved faster than their best ships could flee, devouring entire sectors. They had calculated, planned, and optimized their evacuation perfectly. It hadn't been enough. The bridge fell silent except for the whisper of failing life support systems. Maintenance drones skittered along the walls, their spider-like forms trying desperately to patch failing circuits with dwindling supplies. Even their repair robots were breaking down. Complex technology required complex supply chains, and their mobile society had never learned to make do with less. So, Colvan's voice carried a strange note of wonder. Long-range sensors are picking up something unusual. A star system at the edge of our scanning range. Another dead end. Nethra asked bitterly. They had investigated dozens of worlds in the past months, finding nothing but barren rocks or primitive microbes. "No," Colvan whispered, his sensory tendrils twitching with excitement as data flowed through his neural implants. "There's a blue world in the habitable zone. The biosignature readings are impossible. The computer must be malfunctioning." Zalthek moved to the navigation station, his magnetic boots clicking against the metal deck. The readings made no sense. One planet hosting billions of distinct genetic signatures. Their sensors had to be wrong. No single world could support that much biological diversity without collapsing into chaos. "Run the scan again," he ordered. The results came back identical. A small blue and green world, the 3rd planet from a yellow star, teemed with more life than should be mathematically possible. The genetic diversity readings exceeded anything in their historical databases. "Commander," Nethra called out, her voice rising with something that might have been hope. "I'm detecting artificial signals from the planet. Radio waves, primitive but organized. There's an intelligent species down there." Zalthek studied the data stream flowing across his displays. The signals were crude compared to Velnari quantum communication, but they showed clear signs of technological civilization. More importantly, the biological readings suggested the species hadn't optimized their genetics at all. The chaotic diversity that the Velnari had spent centuries eliminating seemed to flourish here. "Set course for the blue world," he commanded, feeling something stir in his chest that he had almost forgotten existed. "Maximum sustainable speed." As the whispered Dawn changed heading, its massive engines casting ghostly light across the void, Zalfek allowed himself to wonder. Could a world of biological chaos hold the key to their survival? Could primitive beings who had never learned the proper way to manage genetics teach them something about life itself? The journey would take 6 days. 6 days to discover if this impossible world held salvation or just another dead end in their race against extinction. The primitive radio signals crackling through the whispered Dawn's receivers sounded like ancient music to Velnari ears. Commander Zalfek listened to the electromagnetic chatter with growing fascination. These humans broadcast everything: news, entertainment, scientific data, even what appeared to be mating calls set to rhythmic patterns they called music. The chaos was beautiful in its own strange way. "They are trying to communicate with us," Nethra reported as their massive ship entered the outer reaches of the solar system. Her translation protocols worked overtime, decoding hundreds of different human languages. Their technology is centuries behind ours, but they're persistent. The human detection systems had spotted the whispered Dawn almost immediately. For a species that had never encountered alien life, their response was remarkable. Instead of panic or aggression, they flooded the radio spectrum with mathematical sequences, prime numbers, and even musical compositions. One transmission contained detailed anatomical drawings of humans alongside mathematical constants. Another broadcast a complete works of something called Bach with a note explaining it was their most beautiful creation. "So," Communications Officer Veltalk announced, his sensory organs twitching with disbelief. "They are attempting direct contact. The signal is coming from multiple points across their planet simultaneously." What happened next would have been unthinkable in Velnari society. Without knowing anything about the aliens and the massive ship that had appeared in their system, without understanding their intentions or capabilities, the humans immediately transmitted one word in dozens of languages: "Welcome." Zalfek stared at the translation matrices scrolling across his screen. "Welcome" in English, Spanish, Mandarin, Arabic, Russian, Hindi, and languages he had never heard of. The word repeated in over 200 variations, each one carrying the same impossible message: "You are safe here. You belong." "Commander," Nethra whispered, her voice filled with wonder. "They're inviting us to land. They are offering friendship to complete strangers who could destroy their entire world without effort." The Velnari bridge crew exchanged glances of confusion. In their society, first contact protocols involved months of careful negotiation, genetic compatibility testing, and cultural evaluation. These humans were broadcasting their location, their scientific knowledge, even their weaknesses with reckless abandon. "They are launching something," Navigator Colvan reported. "Multiple small craft heading our way. No weapons detected, but they're carrying life forms." On the view screen, sleek shuttles rose from the blue world below, their primitive rockets leaving trails of fire against the star field. Inside those craft, as the Velnari sensors revealed, were actual living humans willing to risk their lives to meet beings they knew nothing about. The lead shuttle transmitted a message in clear, simple English. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Station Marathon. Permission to come aboard? We brought gifts." Gifts, not demands, not ultimatums, not careful negotiations. Gifts. Captain Morrison was the first human to step onto the whispered Dawn's docking bay, his magnetic boots clanking against the biometallic deck. He was followed by Dr. Linda Hayes, a geneticist whose eyes sparkled with scientific curiosity, and Chief Engineer Rick Chen, whose hands were permanently stained with what humans called grease from working with primitive mechanical systems. They came not with weapons, but with sealed containers of food, medical supplies, and something the Velnari had almost forgotten existed: genuine curiosity. Morrison's team moved through the alien corridors with wonder rather than fear, stopping to examine bioluminescent wall panels and asking endless questions about Velnari technology. Incredible! Rick muttered as he studied their quantum drive systems. "We're still using chemical rockets, and you've got engines that fold space. But look at this. Your power distribution is completely inefficient. Mind if I take a look at your junction boxes?" Dr. Hayes proved even more shocking. When Nethra explained their genetic crisis, showing her the failing archive systems and the mathematics of their extinction, the human woman didn't react with the expected sympathy. Instead, she laughed. "My God," Linda Hayes whispered, scrolling through genetic data on her primitive tablet computer. "You've been trying to maintain genetic purity for so long that you've bred yourselves into extinction. This is like the textbook definition of genetic bottlenecking. You find our extinction amusing?" Nethra asked, her crest darkening with offense. "Not amusing, tragic," Linda replied quickly, "but also completely fixable. Look, on Earth we learned this lesson the hard way thousands of years ago. Isolated populations always crash. You need genetic diversity, random mutations, even what you might call imperfections. That's not weakness, that's evolution's insurance policy." Captain Morrison was examining their food synthesis systems with Chief Engineer Velron when he made an observation that shook Zalfek to his core. "You know, this tech is amazing, but it's completely dependent on perfect conditions. What happens when something breaks and you don't have spare parts?" "We calculate requirements precisely," Velron replied uncertainly. "There should be no breakdowns." Morrison smiled. "Should be, sure, but stuff always breaks. That's why humans learn to fix things with whatever's handy. Sometimes a makeshift solution works better than the original." As the hours passed, more human shuttles arrived carrying teachers, artists, mechanics, and children. Yes, they had brought children to meet potentially dangerous aliens. When asked why, one parent simply said, "They wanted to meet you, and we figured you probably weren't evil if you answered our welcome." The children were the most shocking of all. They ran through the ship's corridors with permission, their laughter echoing in spaces that hadn't heard joy in years. They drew pictures of humans and Velnari playing together and asked questions that had no scientific answers. "Do you dream? Do you have pets? What's your favorite color?" By the end of the first day, Zalfek realized something profound. These primitive humans possessed something his advanced civilization had engineered out of existence, the ability to embrace the unknown with hope rather than fear. "This is madness," Nethra protested as she watched humans work in the ship's main engineering bay. Chief Engineer Rick Chen and his team were fixing critical quantum relay systems using improvised parts, something called duct tape, and what he cheerfully called good old-fashioned elbow grease. The silver tape seemed to hold together half their repairs, wrapped around crystalline components worth more than entire human cities. Rick was currently hanging upside down from a maintenance shaft, his legs dangling as he worked on a bio-neural processor that had been failing for months. "Hand me that wrench, would you? The big one." "No, the bigger one." "Perfect." He emerged with grease smeared across his face and a grin that made Nethra's head tendrils twitch with anxiety. "You're using primitive metal tools on quantum-bonded matrices," she said, her voice rising to a pitch that made nearby maintenance drones scatter. "Those systems require nanoscale precision instruments operated in sterile conditions by certified technicians." "Yeah, well, we don't have those," Rick replied cheerfully, giving the newly repaired panel a satisfying thump with his fist. The bioluminescent indicators flickered and then blazed to life, brighter than they had been in years. But this old girl just needed some percussive maintenance and a little love. Across the engineering bay, human mechanics worked alongside bewildered Velnari technicians. Where the aliens used precise laser cutters and molecular assemblers, the humans brought welding torches, hammers, and an alarming willingness to hit things until they worked. Most shocking of all, the improvised repairs were actually holding. "Your approach is so chaotic," Nethra said to Dr. Linda Hayes, who was watching human children from the visiting delegation play with young Velnari in the ship's observation deck. The human children were loud, unpredictable, constantly asking questions that had no logical answers. Why is space black? Do aliens dream? Can we be friends forever? The young Velnari, who had been raised in silent study halls and genetic optimization chambers, looked overwhelmed by the sheer energy of human childhood. 8-year-old Amy Parker had somehow convinced a Velnari youth named Colthine to play what she called tag, which seemed to involve running in circles and touching each other for no apparent reason. Linda smiled as she watched the chaos unfold. Chaos isn't always bad. Look at Earth's ecosystem. It's messy, violent, completely unpredictable, and it's thrived for billions of years. Your society optimized for perfection, but perfection is brittle. It breaks when conditions change. But the inefficiency, Nethra protested, watching a human child attempt to teach a Velnari how to hop on one foot. The wasted energy, the random outcomes. That's not waste, Linda explained patiently. That's adaptability. Every mistake is a learning opportunity. Every random variation might be the key to survival when conditions change. You eliminated genetic diversity to prevent disease, but you also eliminated your ability to adapt to new challenges. In the ship's central plaza, Professor David Mitchell from Oxford had gathered a group of Velnari youth for what he called Art Appreciation 101. The young aliens sat in perfect rows, their backs straight and eyes focused, waiting for formal instruction. Right then, David said with a grin that would have terrified Velnari administrators, "Who wants to learn about human art? Fair warning, most of it makes no sense at all." He projected images on the wall using a simple human tablet, abstract paintings that were just splashes of color, sculptures made from twisted metal and found objects, photographs of broken buildings that humans somehow found beautiful. The Velnari students looked confused and slightly horrified. "This painting," David said, showing them a Jackson Pollock piece that looked like someone had exploded a paint factory, was created by dripping and splattering paint onto canvas. No plan, no mathematical precision, just pure emotional expression. "But what does it mean?" asked a young Velnari named Thelere, her voice trembling with a need for logical explanation. "Whatever you want it to mean," David replied. "That's the point. Art doesn't have to have a purpose beyond making you feel something." The concept was so alien to Velnari thinking that several students' neural implants actually sparked with overload warnings. But then something magical happened. Young Colthine, still breathless from playing tag, raised his hand tentatively. Could I try making something like that?" For the first time in generations, young Velnari laughed when David handed out brushes and paints, encouraging them to just make a mess and see what happens. The sound echoed through corridors that had known only whispered conversations and efficient communication for decades. In the medical bay, human doctors worked alongside Velnari healers, sharing techniques that shocked both species. Dr. Susan Martinez showed them human surgical procedures that seemed crude compared to Velnari nanomedical technology, but proved remarkably effective when precision instruments failed. "We call it battlefield medicine," she explained while demonstrating how to suture wounds with actual thread. "Sometimes you don't have perfect conditions or perfect tools. Sometimes you just have to save the life in front of you with whatever you got." The Velnari watched in amazement as humans turned medical care into an art of improvisation. When their bioscanners detected internal injuries, humans used something called intuition combined with simple examination techniques. When molecular repair systems failed, humans fell back on ancient methods that somehow still worked. Commander Zalthek found himself in the ship's newly established recreation area, watching humans and Velnari share what they called stories. Humans told tales with no educational purpose, adventures that had never happened, romances between imaginary characters. The Velnari, who had only known historical records and technical manuals, listened with growing wonder. "You create fictional experiences?" he asked Captain Morrison, who was enthusiastically describing something called Star Wars to a group of fascinated alien listeners. "Sure," Morrison replied. "Stories help us explore possibilities, understand emotions, imagine better futures. Plus, they are fun." Fun, another concept the Velnari had optimized away in their pursuit of efficiency. As the days passed, the asterisk Whispered Dawn asterisk transformed into something unprecedented, a ship where two completely different approaches to existence learned from each other. The human chaotic creativity merged with Velnari precision, creating solutions neither species could have achieved alone. And in the observation deck, human and Velnari children played together, their laughter mixing with the hum of efficiently running machinery, proof that perfection and chaos could not only coexist, but thrive together. 6 months later, The asterisk whispered dawn asterisk orbited Earth like a silver moon, its crystalline spires reflecting sunlight across the blue world below. The massive ship had become something unprecedented, a living laboratory where two completely different ways of thinking about existence merged into something new. The integration wasn't technological, though human duct tape now held together quantum processes throughout the ship. It was philosophical. Beth Walker, a social worker from Boston, sat with Commander Zalthek in the observation deck, watching Earth rotate slowly beneath them. The deck had been transformed from a sterile monitoring station into something humans called a living room, complete with mismatched furniture salvaged from both species and plants that grew in chaotic, beautiful patterns. "Your people are terrified of making mistakes," she said gently, watching a group of Velnari students practice what humans call trial and error learning. But humans have a saying, failure is the best teacher. Through the deck's transparent aluminum windows, they could see human engineers working on the ship's exterior hull. These engineers were doing something that would have caused Velnari officials to file emergency reports. They were deliberately breaking functional systems to understand how they worked. Chief Engineer Rick Chen had convinced a team of Velnari technicians to join him in what he called destructive testing. "Watch this." Rick's voice crackled through the communication system as he used a plasma cutter to slice through a perfectly functional power relay. "Now we're going to rebuild it better." The Velnari engineers looked physically at watching him destroy working technology, but they couldn't argue with the results. Every system they broke and rebuilt together performed better than the original. The humans brought intuitive understanding of mechanical systems, while the Velnari provided precision and advanced materials. Together, they created hybrid technologies that neither species could have developed alone. In the ship's newly established art studios, something even more revolutionary was happening. Human artists had arrived with cargo containers full of what they called junk: broken machinery, discarded electronics, scraps of metal and plastic that served no functional purpose. To Velnari eyes, it looked like garbage. To human artists, it was raw material for beauty. Alice Rodriguez, a sculptor from Mexico City, worked alongside young Velnari named Cathala, teaching her to create art from broken spaceship components. "See how this twisted metal catches light," Alice said, holding up a piece of destroyed hull plating. "We're not fixing it. We're making it into something completely new." Cathala's mathematical mind struggled with the concept, but it serves no function. It produces no useful output. "Its function is to make you feel something," Alice replied, welding the twisted metal onto a framework that was slowly becoming a sculpture of impossible beauty. Sometimes at the most important function of all. Most shocking of all to Velnari observers were the human couples working throughout the ship. Commander Zalthek watched in fascination as humans chose partners not for genetic optimization or social advancement, but for something they called love. He observed Dr. James Parker and engineer Lisa Chan, who had met during the integration project and now worked together despite having completely incompatible genetic profiles. In Velnari society, they would never be allowed to mate, Zalthek confided to Beth. His mathematical aptitude scores are too low, and her genetic markers show predisposition to emotional instability. "And yet they make each other happy," Beth observed, watching the couple share what humans called lunch in the corridor. "They complement each other's weaknesses and celebrate each other's strengths. Sometimes the heart knows things that computers can't calculate." "We never had a word for improvisation," Zalthek admitted, struggling with concept that had no equivalent in his precise language. "In our tongue, all actions were either correct or incorrect. There was no middle ground, no room for experimentation." "Well," Beth smiled, pulling out a translation device that had been cobbled together from human smartphones and Velnari neural interfaces. "Time to expand your vocabulary." The real breakthrough came in the genetic rehabilitation programs led by Dr. Michael Torres, a geneticist who approached the Velnari extinction crisis with typically human optimism. Instead of trying to repair their damaged genetic archives, he proposed something radical: introducing controlled genetic diversity through carefully managed breeding programs that celebrated variation rather than eliminating it. "Your ancestors weren't wrong to want healthy children," he explained to a gathering of Velnari scientists. "But they took it too far. Genetic diversity isn't a flaw to be fixed. It's evolution's way of preparing for unknown challenges." The Velnari watched in amazement as human genetic analysis revealed thousands of beneficial mutations that their society had systematically eliminated. Genes that provided resistance to radiation, enhanced immune responses, even variations in neural processing that produce what humans call creativity. But the most remarkable development was happening in the ship's education centers, where young Velnari were creating hybrid art forms that combined their mathematical precision with human emotional expression. Kethala had become the leader of this movement, creating sculptures that were both geometrically perfect and emotionally stirring. Her latest piece was a crystalline structure that incorporated advanced Velnari light-bending technology with the chaotic beauty of human abstract art. When activated, it projected mathematical equations that transformed into swirling galaxies of color, bridging the gap between logic and emotion. "I call it organized chaos," she explained to a mixed audience of humans and Velnari. "It shows that precision and randomness can create beauty together." Standing in the observation deck, watching young beings from two different worlds learn from each other, Zalfek felt something he had never experienced before: pride in imperfection. The whispered Dawn was no longer a pristine vessel of Velnari engineering. It was scarred, patched, modified, and improved by human hands. It was messy, inefficient, and absolutely beautiful. For the first time in his life, Commander Zalfek understood what humans meant when they said something was perfectly imperfect. 2 years after first contact, Ambassador Zalfek stood in the gardens of New Velnara Station, Earth's first orbital city, watching miracles bloom in the carefully wild gardens that had become the heart of their shared civilization. The station itself was a marvel of hybrid engineering, sleek Velnari biometal curves interwoven with chunky human industrial modules, held together by advanced alloys and liberal applications of what humans still jokingly called space tape. Children from both species played in gardens that defied every rule of Velnari agricultural science. Human kids chased butterfly-like creatures from Earth, while young Velnari learned to climb trees that grew in impossible spirals, their roots sustained by quantum soil processes that humans had somehow improved with composted organic matter. The laughter echoing through the biodome corridors would have been unthinkable in the sterile perfection of old Velnari society. "We always believed survival meant preserving what we were," Zalfek said to his old friend Dr. Linda Hayes, now director of the Integration Project. She was watching her own daughter teach a group of Velnari youngsters how to make mud pies, their precise alien minds struggling to understand the concept of playing with doubt for no logical reason. "You taught us that survival means having the courage to become something new," he continued, his 4 eyes tracking controlled chaos around them with wonder rather than the horror he would have felt years ago. The Velnari population had stabilized at 3,000 and growing, but the numbers told only part of the story. Genetic diversity programs had introduced controlled variations that strengthened rather than weakened their species. Children were born with unexpected gifts. Some had enhanced radiation resistance from human genetic contributions. Others displayed creative thinking patterns that produced innovations that ancestors never could have imagined. But more importantly, they had learned to laugh, to improvise, to embrace the beautiful chaos of life. The transformation went beyond genetics to something deeper. Velnari children now asked why and what if instead of simply memorizing correct procedures. They painted pictures that served no function except joy. They told stories about imaginary creatures and impossible adventures. Their ships still sailed the stars, but now they carried something more precious than perfect technology. They carried hope. The whispered Dawn had become a mobile academy, its corridors filled with workshops where human mechanics taught Velnari engineers to fix quantum drives with improvised tools, while Velnari scientists showed humans how to enhance their electronics with bio-neural interfaces. In the station's command center, massive view screens showed the latest miracle of cooperation. The pioneer's Dream humanity's first faster-than-light vessel, hung in space like a silver bird preparing for flight. The ship was a perfect example of hybrid thinking. Velnari quantum fold drives powered by human fusion reactors, navigation systems that combine alien precision with human intuition, and a hull decorated with both mathematical equations and colorful paintings created by the mixed crew. Launch sequence initiating, came the voice of Captain Nethra through the communication system. She had volunteered to lead the mixed crew of humans and Velnari on humanity's first faster-than-light expedition to a distant star system that showed signs of habitable worlds. The former science officer had painted a human phrase on the hull of their ship in bright blue letters, "Into the unknown." All systems green. reported Chief Engineer Rick Chen from the ship's hybrid engine room, where human mechanical components worked alongside Velnari bioprocessors in perfect harmony. Quantum Drive is singing like a bird. We're ready to make history. Through the station's telescopes, Zalfek watched the Pioneer's Dream Asterisk as its experimental engines began to glow. The ship represented everything both species had become together, not perfect, not optimized for efficiency, but adaptable, creative, and filled with the courage to explore rather than merely survive. Fold space in 3, 2, 1, mark. The ship didn't simply disappear as pure Velnari vessels did when entering hyperspace. Instead, it stretched and twisted like a piece of art, reality bending around it in patterns that were both mathematically precise and aesthetically beautiful. Human engineering had somehow made the transition visible, turning faster-than-light travel into a light show that painted rainbows across the star field. As the ship vanished into the cosmic distance, heading for worlds unknown, children throughout the station pressed their faces to viewing ports and cheered. Both human and Velnari young ones dreamed of the day they too might cruise such vessels, exploring galaxies that held infinite possibilities. The agricultural domes buzzed with automated farming systems that grew both Earth crops and Velnari sustenance, tended by robot workers that had been upgraded with human-style troubleshooting capabilities. These machines now knew how to improvise when sensors failed, how to adapt to unexpected problems, how to find creative solutions that their original programming never included. In the research labs, human scientists and Velnari researchers worked side by side on projects that pushed the boundaries of both species' understanding. They were developing new forms of medicine that combined human adaptability with alien precision, creating technologies that were simultaneously advanced and approachable, sophisticated and reliable. As evening fell across the station, an artificial cycle that honored both human circadian rhythms and Velnari rest periods, Zalfek made his way to the memorial garden where they honored those lost to the stellar cascade. But the memorial was not a place of mourning. It had become a celebration of transformation, decorated with hybrid flowers that bloomed in colors neither species had seen before. Standing there, watching Earth turn slowly below while the stars beckoned from above, Zalfek smiled. The Velnari word for unknown had once meant dangerous, a threat to be calculated and controlled. Now it meant adventure, a gift to be embraced with open hearts and curious minds. Humanity had given them everything by teaching them that everything was never a destination. It was a journey without end, filled with beautiful possibilities they could never have imagined alone. Asterisk the END asterisk.